Welcome to Detailed, an original podcast by RCAT. This is the show where we uncover lessons learned to help you navigate your next project. I'm Cherise Lakeside, Senior Spec Writer at RDH Building Science, and your host. My guests today are Maxwell Jarosz, founding principal of Daft Büro Architecture in Miami, and Noam Dvir, principal and co-founder of Bond in New York. In addition to being a licensed architect, Max is an assistant professor of research and director of fabrication at the University of Miami, where he oversees the fabrication facilities and operations. He teaches courses on robotics, digital fabrication, and emerging technology in the field of architecture. His work has been included in a variety of publications, such as Architect Magazine and Mass Context, and presented in conferences including the 2023 Smart Cities Conference and the 2019 AIA Conference. Max holds a Master of Architecture from the Massachusetts Institute of Technology, or MIT, and additionally, he holds a Master of Business Administration from the University of Miami. Prior to joining the University of Miami, Max was a project architect and worked at internationally recognized architecture firms in both Boston and New York. Noam, with his partner in practice and life, Rauschwerger, founded Bond in 2021. The New York-based award-winning architecture and interior design practice focuses on art and fashion projects, together with a large portfolio of innovative residential design. Prior to Bond, Noam was a director in WeWork and a project leader at OMA, New York. He holds a Master of Architecture from Harvard Graduate School of Design. Harvard and MIT in the house. The project we will be talking about today is PatBO, a flagship boutique retail store within the design district in Miami, Florida. With really gorgeous clothes, I might add. More than just a store, this space transforms the shopping experience into a work of art. The scope is a tenant improvement of 2,700 square feet over 2 floors, including cutting through the existing concrete slab to install a feature stair. The exterior was also modified to create visible separation from the adjacent stores. In addition, faced with a challenging timeline, the design contract to opening for a major launch event, the space was turned over in about 10 months. Now, let's get into the details. Max and Noam, welcome to Detailed. I am so honored to have both of you here today. How are you?
I'm doing well. How about you?
You know, it's Wednesday. It's a good day.
It's
always a good day.
Yeah.
Yes, I really appreciate you guys taking time out of your busy schedules to be on the show. We'll get right down to business. So my listeners who have heard this podcast before know that I always start with an icebreaker question just to warm us up and also just to get to know a little something about you. So as I was trolling you online and reading your bios and, doing my homework, I'm like, oh, okay, I've got an MIT grad and a Harvard grad in the house today. And so we already know you're really smart because, I'm sorry, everybody knows that. I actually went to MIT just to go to MIT and buy a t-shirt. And we work in a pretty intense business that often requires a lot of hours. Deadlines are really crazy, all kinds of challenges every day. And we all have to navigate that. So I'm always really curious, how do you relax? What do you do for fun? What interests you, your hobbies? How do you find that balance? What do you do to find that balance that's not related to architecture? I say that now because I ask that question, they start telling me about something in architecture. No, I want to know, what do you do not related to architecture to keep that balance in your career?
Yeah, I think it's a good question because both Max and I are working with our partners. I work with my husband and Max works with his wife, Jess. So for me, this is my full-time job. Work is life and life is work, which works really beautifully for us. But I would say that we learned through the years that we need to create space for non-work related as much experiences and activities as much as possible. For us, we travel, like to go discover a new place. We were just in Marfa, a few weeks ago to see Donald Judd, who is of course connected to what we do, but I think kind of the opportunity to take a break from the office, disconnect a little bit is really important. So travel is something that we do a lot. We also have to see things all the time to just kind of have ideas. So that's one thing we do a lot. And another thing is that we keep a very active social schedule in New York. There's something every night. And of course, it's all related to work at the end of the day. But in the same time, it's also, at the end of the day, shut down the computer and go and meet interesting people.
Well, like there's nothing to do in New York, a perfect city to, get out of the house and go do things. Max, how about you?
Yeah, I think the two things that we like to do, one of them is cooking, which I think moving through the pandemic when everyone brought their computers home, it became so easy to just respond to any email that comes through at 7 or 8 at night. But I find that cooking forces you to get a little bit messy. You got pasta on your finger. You can't quite respond to anything. You can't touch your phone unless you're looking at a recipe. So I think that's something that's like a little bit procedural. You can really focus in on cutting what you need to cut and trying to prepare some new foods. It also gives my wife and I a little bit of time to kind of talk, reconnect with each other a little bit. And then we get to enjoy some really nice food out of it. So that's one thing that we really like to do. Another one that's recent is I used to play in a band when I was much younger, and I probably stopped playing for about 8 years through architecture school and kind of early in the career. But we actually just started a band with 2 of my wife's former coworkers. So we get together probably twice a month or a little bit less than that to play for a couple hours, which has been really fun.
What do you play?
I'm the bass guitarist.
Nice. Had I realized that you both work with your partners, I think my icebreaker question would have been, how do you keep from killing each other? That's a we'll save that one for another day. Next time I have you guys back, we can talk about that one. That would be my 24/7. Oh yeah, I don't know about that. So let's talk about this project. I haven't had an opportunity yet. I think we're on something like 84 interviews now on this podcast, and I haven't had an opportunity to do too many interviews in the retail arena. Done all kinds of buildings. If I was new to the retail design environment, as an architect, I'm new to the retail design environment, and I came to you for advice, what would you tell me are the key things I need to be thinking about from day one that are unique to designing this kind of project?
I think the retail design landscape, let's call it, is going through a really exciting time. What's been happening, as you know, is that D2C, direct to consumer, meaning buying online, became huge, even more in the pandemic. And then the typical brick and mortar store, meaning that the actual location of the shop, changed. It used to be that you had to go to the shop to actually see what's available. Today everything is online. And with this client, PatBO, which is a high-end Brazilian women's wear brand from Sao Paulo, they had a very good platform, both digital and physical, in Brazil. And then for quite a few years, they only had one shop in the States, in New York City, because they have a great D2C platform and people just buy. We work with PatBO on their showroom in New York, which is between an office and a retail shop. But then when the opportunity came to design something in Miami Design District, which is one of the most important design and retail destinations in the world, it was clear that what we need to create is not just a shop, it's almost like a brand embassy. So it's a place where somebody who's either already a customer or a new customer can walk into the shop and not only experience the beautiful artistry that goes into the garments, but also to learn something about the brand through the space. So kind of connecting, when to your question, I think retail today has moved from just being a place where you sell clothes to being a place where you have an experience. So a lot of people talk about this as kind of switching from transaction to interaction. So of course they have to, they have to sell, they have to make a lot of money to pay for the rent, etc. But what's really important is that the client sees a physical space that's hopefully astounding and sublime and inspires them and creates another level of connection with the brand. And my company, my office, started doing retail a few years ago. We are definitely doing more of it. And I think that the brief that we see from clients is very similar. It's not, it's not a Nike shop, although Nike shops are amazing at their own kind of good, of course. It's usually smaller retailers that would put a lot of money into the design, into the experience of the space. And it's instead of just filling it up with, every dress or garment, there's a space for somebody to sit down. There's a place to, experience some maybe other products that are not available online. It's a space that hopefully manifests the aesthetic direction of the brand. And again, for us, this was a really exciting moment. The company, or PatBO, already had plethora of stores in Brazil, but this is their first real flagship in America. And Design District has buildings by every major company, an office in the world. It has an OMA building, has an Herzog and Miron building. Dealers Scofidio and Renfro are doing the new Cartier over there. So it has to be extremely elevated to kind of match the competition, and in the same time also provide a moment of reprise, introducing the very feminine kind of culture. It's a women-led company, but also, the beautiful draping of the dress, everything is quite, it's very Brazil, very sexy, very colorful. So our work and our kind of brief was to create a space that would be really incredible, but in the same time would help the retailer to show off the garments.
Right. Well, it's a perfect space for that. How about you, Max? What would your advice to me be if I was jumping into that pool of what's the most important thing to think about?
Definitely. So our office hadn't done much retail, so we were happy to partner with Noam's team to work on this. And what I was surprised by was the kind of pace of the projects. They have to happen fast, and not only because everybody wants their project to open as soon as possible, but as Noam said, particularly in the design district, it's super competitive. Everyone's opening up a new shop. I think probably the same week we opened, about 10 other shops opened, and you don't want to be second. And so you spend all this money on this kind of unique experience that you want your customers to experience, and the store across the street opens before you and they have a similar experience. That takes such a knock into your project. And so I think you had to be ready to really turn these projects around as fast as you can. So they're intense, they're quick, but it's pretty exciting to see a project that really probably started this year and we're able to open in a couple months, which I think is pretty unique for our worlds.
Yeah, and we're going to talk a little bit more about that. So let's start with, we'll get into more details, but let's start with a broad description of the space and the scope of work that you were taking on when you took this project. So basically, paint me a verbal picture. So if it's somebody that's only listening to our podcast and not watching the interview on YouTube, make me, if my eyes are closed, make me see what you're designing here.
Okay, interesting challenge. So the boutique, it's more than a store. It's a boutique, as I kind of started hinting to. It's located in a building that has a few other shops. All of them have the same type of facade. It was built by, the building itself was designed by a company from a Scandinavian country. I can't remember, it's Denmark or Sweden. And it's quite interesting. It has different bumps out on the second floor, and the first floor is just kind of lined up with stores. So our idea was to try and kind of make a gesture or create a gesture that makes our unit stand out in an array of other shops. So that was one thing, and a lot of the work that went into the shop was actually making this remarkable moment stand out. So we decided to push in the front door and kind of the entry foyer by 3.5 feet. So there's a more clear connection between the street and the shop, interior, like inside, outside connection, and create a large arch that kind of signifies the entry to the shop. And then we painted the entire wood facade pink, which is kind of very typical for PatBO. Again, it's very, very feminine, and not that pink has to be a feminine color, but right. I think through the curves of the arch and the paint color, and then similarly applying a vinyl that has kind of pink stripes at the second floor, you create these kind of two intersecting curves that you see from the street. And in a sea of other, I think we have 6 other shops in our line, ours stands out immediately. Then the idea was to have the original retail space only operated on the first floor, and the second floor was used for storage and such. So it was completely empty and had no equipment, no AC, nothing of that sort. So the second challenge was to create a connection between the floors and create a flagship that goes over or extends over 2 floors. So we inserted this beautiful sculptural staircase that was very hard to build and achieve, and we can get into it a little bit later. And then the first floor, the materiality is stone terrazzo. You walk in, so it kind of extends from the street, harder materials. The second floor, is you go up, is actually this beautiful Parisian salon that has wall-to-wall carpets and curved walls that follow the 2 demising walls on either side of the space. So you have 2 experiences, and the thought was that for a client, some people want to come in and just see what's available and kind of step out. But for some other people that actually want to try on a few things, maybe they're with family or with a group of friends, they can sit upstairs in the lounge. Of course, they're offered some drinks. It's a beautiful experience. And you have both of these experiences in the same shop. So we tried to create 2 very distinct spaces with a connecting staircase that really opens up the space and provides this kind of wow moment. And then to that, everything that we designed, all the fittings, all the furniture, everything is custom. All the lighting, of course, is extremely important. So very innovative solutions for lighting throughout, trying to hide as much of the direct lighting source as possible. And maybe lastly, the idea was to also create a space that is very editorial, and that the customers, many of them are, interested in social media, etc., could take photos in a million places. And we actually saw it in the opening. It's really conducive for that. And when we design retail spaces, many times you have to have an element, or you have to design the space in a way that if somebody takes a photo, you immediately know where they are.
I got to tell you, when I first looked at the picture of the project, I had to double take, as I was working out my questions, like, wait a minute, is this part of a building or is this the whole building? The only thing you see when you look there is this shop. There may be other shops there, but when I look at the picture, the only thing I see is this shop. So you wildly succeeded. From the exterior, it's beautiful inside. They have beautiful clothes, and I love the colors and stuff as well, because the clothes are very colorful. So I'm sure they really pop in that space. But the stair is amazing. The exterior is amazing. It's like, I never would have thought about the social media thing. There's a little handy little tip, is thinking about what happens when people take selfies in your space.
Yeah, I made a career getting designing space with sexy lighting. Seriously. So
you did a good job.
The fitting rooms everywhere you look, it's really important to have the light, kind of organized around the experience again. So that's what makes it, I think, stand out from just another shop. This is a boutique. It's about an individual experience, but then that you can come in, the clothes show themselves, but then you can try them on. You look great. Maybe you try something that you didn't mean to. You sneak a selfie in this fitting room. Then your friend takes a photo of you on the staircase. All of these, especially for a young brand like PatBO, are extremely, extremely important.
So my listeners know that I love talking about challenges because I think that we learn the most. The things that are easy are easy. You don't learn a lot from that. But when you have problems I don't like the word problems, challenges you need to solve, you learn a lot that makes you a better architect. You had a few on this project, but the number one challenge that was mentioned, or at least the first thing I saw in the project description, was the schedule. So tell me a little bit about, kind of the background or history of this project and what you faced with this schedule and how you made it happen. Because you guys did this in a very short period of time.
Yeah, I think Noam reached out, maybe it was Thanksgiving or near Christmas time last year, and said there was the potential for this project. They were still kind of talking to the client. I think the client was still looking for a space. And then all of a sudden, I think we got an email in February saying, it's on, it's happening, we need to start next week. We're flying down to Miami, let's meet, let's do what we need to do. We all looked at the schedule and we said, this feels a bit aggressive. And everyone kind of felt it was doable. We were like, if everything goes well, this could work. We should warn them that maybe it doesn't work. We looked at we started talking to contractors. They were like, yeah, this could work potentially. But I think, say we started in February or March, Noam's team flew through the design phases, and I think Canada bought the project probably end of May, early June. So that gave us about 6 weeks to turn around the CD set. And then the biggest issue that we face is permitting. So in the city of Miami, it's notoriously a little bit slow. It's been made a little bit worse right now because everything's being routed through a zoning department after we have the cert sign flap. So you have 2 people reviewing every single project that happens in the city, which means they're at a minimum giving you 60 days for your review cycle. So the project essentially then would have to go on hold for 60 days, hopefully get approved on that first cycle. It also means you can't respond to any of the other comments for plumbing. We had some minor comments about ADA requirements, things like that, which you can't respond. So you're kind of like trying to tell the client, they should be calm, we're going to get there. And so what it really took, I think, for us was talking to the contractor saying we didn't want that to be a hiccup in the project. And we had to figure out how we could start slicing it up. So luckily for us, the contractor was very into that mindset. They bought in. They started doing everything that they could inside the space. We submitted a quick demo permit. We started framing everything. And then we really had to look at the kind of long lead items, the stair being one, which again, we can talk about a little bit more later. But the storefront, any kind of the structural steel that was going into the project, and say, we're going to have to start ordering these things. In some cases, ordering them even before we're getting shop drawings. And for a design team, that's hard, right? We have to make sure we don't hit any hiccups in the permitting phase and say, oh, we actually have to change this. That's going to be a significant change order if that happens. So we had to talk to the building officials, see what we could get them to kind of pre-approve, see what we could get the contractor to get fabricated in time. And then that way, the day that the permit came, we essentially wanted to be calling for our first rough inspections essentially the next week. So we got the permit, I think, September 15th, and now we're almost at December 15th, and project's complete. So contractor went in a major sprint, got everything kind of put into the project. We did hit a couple hiccups. For instance, the storefront, we talked to the vendor. They said, sure, we can do this. This is not a problem. And then we realized that they had missed a curve. And so this little 10-inch curve essentially threw off a maximum 12-foot panel, but our door had to slide below that 10 inches for the curve. So essentially that meant we had to go back to the structural engineers, add some steel in, change the storefront. We were able to do that and pick it up where they manufactured it. But those are the kind of things that you really have to have everyone on board. The contractor communicating as soon as they hear back, the design team going to say, okay, we can work around this. Make sure everyone was submitted drawings quickly so we could kind of get them back to the manufacturer. Unfortunately, I think we were able to kind of push through all of that with pretty little hiccups.
That is incredible. I mean, we have our building department here is not famous for being very speedy either. And that stops everything. And when you have a really aggressive schedule, it's stressful.
Oh.
And sometimes you don't know. They say minimum 60 days. In some places like California, that can be 6 months.
No.
So so good communication. It sounds like really amazing communication with the building department.
Yeah, that I think a lot of that came from the contractor. So they had one of their team members was at the building department every day talking to them. And it's an interesting game that they have to play because it's a social thing, right? If you push them too much, they're going to tell you, no, I'm not going to review this at all. If you try to give them a little bit of candy or something and see what they're willing to kind of do for you, they might take it. And so really we get messages from them that were like, okay, this electric's going to go ahead and approve, or they have comments, they'll submit that. Other ones, they'd be like, we have to back off for a little bit. We can't keep pushing them. If we keep pushing them, they're going to put us in their no list. And so we really had to kind of balance that, but lots of meetings with the building department.
It seems like it always boils down to communication. At the end of the day, the better the communication, the easier and more effective the project is. There were a couple of other unique design challenges that I'd like to talk to you about. The first one is that insane stair. It is that drew me the second I looked at the picture, like, wow. Wait, didn't I just read they had a really aggressive schedule? How the heck did they get this done? Tell me about the challenge of that stair, because it really does pop. I mean, it really stands out in that space, and what you did to solve that challenge. And don't be afraid to get technical.
Yeah, so I think the stair, there was two different components that made it challenging. I think one was the design side and one was the fabrication side. So Noam's team, I think, came up with a really great design for that. There's kind of certain detailing they did on the underside that I think really worked well. The tricky part was when they handed the project off to us and we knew that we had the schedule and we had to essentially start prefabricating it or getting the permit approved, and we couldn't miss. And so we looked at it. We realized we technically met all of the egress requirements for the building, so we didn't have to treat it as an egress stair, which is going to be great. And then we wanted to say, let's make sure we're right about this. Let's reach out. We talked to the fire marshal. They said, you're good. You have 2 exits. Fine. And the building official, it's tricky in our code here. It doesn't say anything about stairs other than egress stairs. It just says, go to the egress section and here's your requirements for the stair. So we said, hey, we don't really have any requirements for it. It's not going to be an egress stair. It's this feature stair. I said, we don't care. It has to meet the same requirements. You don't have to fireproof it, but everything else has to meet. And for us, it's tricky because you have all of these beautiful spiral staircases in the design district. Acme has one. Diesel has a beautiful one. And you essentially only have about a 2-foot radius that you're allowed to have. So you can really fly down things. They can be very tight, very compressed. As soon as you move into what's considered a curved stair, it goes to 2 times the width of the stair. So for us, that meant a 7-foot radius in a 28-foot wide space. And we have 2 curves. That's essentially 7-foot radius on one side, 7-foot radius on the other side. So Noam's beautiful staircase all of a sudden got massive. So we had to go back. We had to maximize the ratio of width so that we could reduce the width of the radius requirement. And we ended up through 2 or 3 different reiterations with us and the structural team, ended up getting it within 1-inch space of tolerance in the space. So we essentially it goes essentially right between 2 beams, concrete beams in the space. And so you're locked into those, and we have to kind of puncture through both and then be able to run everything else through that. So that was really challenging in terms of controlling the kind of size of it and also making sure it doesn't turn into this kind of really long staircase that's really small. So as you're walking up, it feels like you're one person kind of going up a 3-foot stair. And I think we ended up getting it to be just about 40 inches wide. So it still feels big enough. You can have a conversation with someone while you're walking up it. And we're just able to kind of sneak it up. I think working with their design team, I think Lisa from Noam's team redrew the stair probably 5 times between sending it to us, sending it to the structural engineers, and we finally got it to work. The other tricky part that we hit with it is the schedule again. And so the structural engineers immediately said, we need a foundation. This is a massive staircase. It's going to be heavy. And we said, well, if we do that, it means we have to go through an inspection on the rebar inside of the foundation. We're going to have to go through an inspection for the foundation itself. And that's all before we can even put the stair in. As we said a little bit earlier, the contractor was trying to do as much ahead of time as possible. So when we worked with the structural engineers was a way to cantilever everything off of these steel columns in the space. They didn't need any special footing, so we're able to kind of redesign the structure. Everything's a steel plate going into the existing slab. And what that meant for the schedule was that the contractor could fabricate everything. So they went ahead, they fabricated it, they started installing it in the space, and essentially, I think about a week after we got the permit approval, we called back to the building inspector and said, hey, we just built this stair in 7 days. I had them under construction for a month. But that really, I think, was the kind of shifting point, getting that approved to kind of clear us for the runway for the last couple months of the project.
Well, if something's beautiful, it should be massive, right? That's my opinion. Bigger is better. Did you want to add anything to that, Noam?
No, I think it's a great description of the staircase issue.
It's incredible. It's really gorgeous. So there was another challenge, and that was the exterior trellis and entryway. Tell me about that and how you made it work. You talked about that a little bit in our first question. I'm assuming when you said you moved the door back. So tell me about that challenge. Why was it a challenge?
So the client, it's okay. I'll just start with a brief description, then you can pick up the technical part. So the challenge with the trellis and the entry moment was the client came to us early on with the process and wanted incredible, unique facade for the building that could never work. Something looks like a flower made out of fiberglass, which is, again, was very, very beautiful, but clearly could not be done in Miami, and not for time, not for code, and not for money. And budget is a key driver throughout the process here. So we tried to see what's the biggest impact we can get for the lowest dollar, right? Which I think my company does a lot of. So we try to understand what's the envelope we can work within, what are the different zoning requirements, what can be pushed in, what can be pushed out. And we found that if we pushed in the storefront and created this kind of entry foyer, we can achieve two things. We can achieve, first of all, unique visibility, meaning something that's pushed in a little bit. And then the paint color is just paint color. Doesn't cost much. So trying to understand it both in 3D and kind of how does it look throughout the building, what you see when you cross the street to the other side. And again, we actually didn't do very much. It's a new storefront system, and it's a curved trellis, and the rest is painted.
Yeah, so I think to add on that, I think the key thing that Noam said is they spent time modeling it in 3D. And I think when you give the drawings to the contractor and when we gave the CAD drawings to the structural engineer, they were only looking at it in 2D. So I kept trying to flag this as something that's a little bit more complicated than it seems like. All of the sections make it seem like a very simple drawing or a simple assembly sequence. And it wasn't that. So essentially originally the idea was to push this thing back and we'd have our building envelope just go directly up from the storefront. So I think the storefront's about 12 feet. I think about another 3 feet, we were just going to build a wall. But in the permitting comments, the structure had to get flipped to go to this beam that was outside. So now all of a sudden, rather than kind of plane, we had to come out and build out this waterproof box. At the same time, on the back side of that, I don't know how well the viewers are able to see my hand motions here. But essentially, we have the existing store that has an interior wall that now has to become an exterior wall. So we have this wall running parallel to the existing store. You can't access it from their store without shutting them down. We have the storefront coming in on the right side. We have the archway that Noam's team designed on the left side. You don't have any kind of tolerance there. Everything's locked into place. And so everyone kind of said, no, it'll be fine, and it'll be fine. And in Miami, it's a hurricane zone. So everything that's rated as an exterior wall is particularly complicated very quickly. So we have this beautiful piece of stone that's up against that wall. And that means there's special requirements for how that's going to get assembled. And the structural engineer said, just bolt it in, it's fine, it'll be easy. And then the contractor said, we can't fit behind that wall. We can't access it to bolt anything from the backside. So then we had to go through to redesign it with this clipping system. So it turned into this super complicated thing where everything else had kind of pushed into this 3'7" width. And now we had to figure out how to kind of enclose all of that. So it became a kind of last minute challenge of figuring out how we can kind of wrap this in. The other complicated thing is right at the tightest point of that assembly, there's a column. So everyone didn't realize that was going to be an issue. So the building code down here for us essentially has requirements for anything that's going to be a steel stud wall, which we could get for about 3/4 of the wall. And the last 18 inches or so, we're going to run into this column. So it turned into this super last minute structural engineering exercise. And luckily, the Eastern Engineering was the structural engineering company we worked with. They were able to figure it out. And I think we needed 3 different sizes of steel studs. We needed the specialty clips. And what should have been like a very simple plan turned into be this super complicated specialty wall that fortunately we were able to figure out.
Kudos to you in that schedule that you took on something like that and still got it done. Let's talk a little bit about the materials used on this project. It's a beautiful space. So we've actually talked about the exterior. So let's just go straight inside. Let's talk about some of the materials and finishes that you used in this store to give it that rich, luxurious feeling, because that's what it has. Just looking at the pictures, that's what I feel when I look at it. So tell me about the interiors a little bit.
The material selection was driven by, I would say, two different paths of thinking. So the first one, very feminine. The client, the boss from Brazil, her name is Patricia Bonaldi, started a company with her husband 10 years ago. I mean, really self-made and knows what the client wants. So although, maybe my company has a very clear kind of aesthetic, there was a question how to bring in how to elevate, these ideas of materials coming from Brazil that are considered, at least in their eyes, feminine and kind of approachable, with our view that this should be a very elevated space that has to compete with Louis Vuitton and Dior and Chanel, or at least has to be in the same level. So it was clear to us that we have to go in a direction that has custom materials and custom mixes and millwork and metalwork throughout. Nothing that you can really recognize as a product. So the first floor idea was that it's a part of the street. It's like a plaza. So we went with a terrazzo material. We created the specialty mix with a company from Michigan that was poured in place. So we actually had a few runs to try different grain colors. We wanted more pink. They brought in more, orange. At some point, there was a question of time and money. So you have to compromise at some points, but we were very happy with where we got. And then the area behind the main retail space, which is the fitting rooms and back of house, is all terracotta tiles. So you move from this very kind of white striking space to a space that has a darker, kind of richer color, which is more conducive for trying clothes and to have, a different experience. So we used a terracotta tile that came from Italy. Again, was late. Somebody has to call the company Italy, yell at them, tell them that they're never going to work in America again. All of these things, which are very true. That's where my Israeli, directness comes into play. And to that, add some softness with fabric that were sent from Brazil. So all the drapery. And we also found a specialty or a custom finish for all the metal work. So the hanging is all kind of cantilevered from the wall. We said brass, but brass could be a million types of things. And we landed on anodized kind of French gold color that has an integrated lighting system inside. So when you put all of them together, you get this kind of very rich feeling or something that you haven't seen before. And in the same lane, thinking about the second floor as this kind of salon in our place that you would feel really comfortable to spend maybe even an hour or an hour and a half, right? So we went with custom color rugs, and the walls are all finished with beautiful oak veneer with some shine to it. So again, the lights really bounce from it. And even the fitting rooms in the second floor that are a little bit of a different experience are all wood lined. And the millwork for these fitting rooms came from Brazil, from a millwork team that worked with us in Brazil. And I think that's really key to note that when you work on a project, when you select materials, it's really important to think about the origin and the story of the materials. So of course we can source marble everywhere and we can source terrazzo everywhere. But I think that there is an added value to getting the fabrics, especially if this is a women's wear company, to get the fabrics done in Brazil in their factory, and to get the mill workers from Brazil with their veneers and their woodworking into the space. And I think these things really add up to something that has a different kind of character. And even the stone is sourced from South America. So of course you could find approved equals, something that we all know very well. You can find an approved equal locally, but I think that pushing to find materials that have a story is really important. And in the same line, we also took care of the interior design. All the furniture are sourced. Everything is sourced from Brazil, from emerging designers. So every corner really has a lot of depth and charge. And I think it really shows up in the overall aesthetic of the space.
There's some real honesty and that being true to the origins of both the company owner and the product, and keeping that home in all pieces and parts. I'm sure that the branding probably has a lot to do with that as well. So let's talk about that millwork from Brazil. That was another challenge on the project, in this very tight schedule project. Tell me about why the millwork was a challenge and how you solved it so that you got to where you needed to go in time for this store to open first.
Yeah, I think, honestly, I don't think we were the ones that solved it. I think we had a lot of concerns about the millwork in Brazil, but ultimately they did a fantastic job. So it was interesting. The client came to us, I think, as a little bit of a value engineering proposal to say, have some amazing millwork found in Brazil that could do this, and I think adds to that story of materiality. But they don't do shop drawings, and they haven't built anything here before.
And they don't speak English.
Yeah.
They don't speak any English.
We knew that we were set up for some challenges, and we talked to them. So they did some veneering for the interior walls on the second floor at the changing room, and they also veneered the interior side of the mullions. And so it turned into a big push at the end, but also a lot of last minute communication. So they essentially say, well, how are we supposed to build this veneer for the storefront when we don't have the storefront installed yet? We have the shop drawings, but they're not going to be installed in time. So we had to essentially send them the shop drawings from the storefront manufacturer and say, build it what you can there. It's not going to be exactly what's installed on site, but we don't have time for you to come back and build it. And then also, by the way, everything that has to be installed has to be Class C for fire rating. They go, we don't have fire ratings. You don't have to worry about that for millwork. And so it turns into this last minute, no, we very much have to meet that. So I think they had to adapt a lot on the spot. Fortunately, they shipped everything. They were able to make the adjustments for the second floor millwork, installed that pretty seamlessly. And then fortunately, they pretty much stayed the entire weekend before opening with a table saw and chop saw, redid the entire veneering for the interior. But I think it turned out pretty great.
Yeah, I can imagine that's, and I've heard that before from architects bringing in products from other countries or fabricated systems from other countries, and there being this difference in how buildings are done.
Yeah.
And having to figure that out.
Yeah, I could just to jump in on that. Some of it is just rating systems. So it's not that the fire rating is particularly difficult to achieve. For that, it was a pretty low space. We have sprinklers in the building, but it's just a documentation that's required. And so for them, it ended up being they just needed to install some half-inch MDF, which they could purchase locally, but all of the suppliers in Brazil don't supply that and say, this is rated for this because it's not a requirement.
Yep.
For us, every place that you buy it from, even if it's Home Depot, will tell you what the rating is. So sometimes it's just as much as saying, now we just have to talk about sourcing and things like that, that other systems just don't incorporate.
And I think that a lot of this, the ability to open on time is really a testament to the harmonious relationship between architects, design team, contractor, and an incredible client. We haven't mentioned her name yet, Karachin, who's the president of PatBO. All working the same direction and problem solving, day to day, nothing is too big or too small to, personally deal with. And I think that this really got us to where we are. This is not one of these projects when you have an architect from abroad, and a local architect that has like no connection with with the architecture team or the design intent, and the client that maybe, has never been to the space before. I think in this case, everybody was so invested personally, including Kara, who's, a president of the company, just solving issues on a day-to-day basis, and having an incredible contractor like Red Door that has worked in design district, knowing that they have our support, of course, also our critique, but have our support, that really helped to get the project built. There were really no fights over ego or over, if somebody blew up something, it's clear that we all have to go in the same direction. And I think that's one of the reasons why the project, we managed to actually open the project on time, more or less on budget. And it doesn't happen in every project. This is actually quite special.
Well, I love that you mentioned ego, because architects, whether right, wrong, or otherwise, have a reputation for oftentimes having big egos and being difficult. And I've always been a believer, I don't care if you're the president of the company or the janitor, you do whatever you need to do to get the job done. And there is nothing that should ever be beneath you. And it's funny how smoothly things go when people set that kind of mindset and that ego aside.
Well,
and it's like, hey, we're a team. We all have the exact same goal. That's why I've never understood that in our industry. Everything we do is as a team. Yeah, so that's the goal.
It's true. And I think that Max and I had a previous introduction. We actually worked at OMA together for a split second. Max, you were on my team for a project.
What month for an externship?
Externship. But we both come, from maybe similar backgrounds. You mentioned MIT and GSD, maybe similar backgrounds. We worked at OMA, and I think that the attitude coming from the architect, and that's what I maybe learned, one of the key lessons I learned, the attitude coming from you, the architect. It doesn't matter if you're the most important person in the room or the least important person in the room. You set the tone for everybody else. And I think that both Max and I managed to have an incredible working, relationship. And I think that transpires the rest. So there's no drama. If there's a problem, we solve it. Even if there's a huge problem, we solve it on, Friday at 9 p.m. We still solve it. And I think that that's something really important that I learned working in very complicated and challenging sites. That really the architecture, the designer, every part of the design team, as long as you understand that your position is not to just judge and make it difficult for everybody, is actually to kind of push everybody towards, fulfilling your design intent.
Oh, that's a lesson a lot of people could learn.
Yep. I think one thing I'd like to just add there, and Noam's being maybe a little bit humble about it, I think their team, one, is very good at rationalizing, pushing the design intent and knowing when we do have to be a team and when we need to make some changes. But the other thing is you don't want the contractor to just change things and say, okay, there's nothing we can do about it. So I think his team did a really fantastic job, even just holding accountability. So we might say that we had to change out a material or something because we couldn't get it, but it should have been sourced on time. And I think it's important for the client to see that someone's holding the contractor responsible in those situations and saying, this is not acceptable. We do understand we're going to have to change something. That's fine. We'll find another alternate and we should still make the project turn out great. But I think there is something important, the client seeing at least, that there's some pushback and not just letting everything turn into we're just going to do it this way because it's easier. Yeah.
Good point. So let's talk about construction for just a moment. You could have the most perfect contractor in the world, and there's always going to be a challenge during construction, particularly when you're working in an existing building that's already there. Just give me what would you say your one biggest actually during construction surprise or challenge was that everybody had to jump on board and become that team and get it solved?
It's an interesting question. I think we didn't really have, maybe just stare a little bit. There was some kind of inspection issues that we had, but it's a pretty unique environment because this is an existing building, but fortunately for us, the contractor actually had done the space that was in there before. So they had already cut into the foundations. They knew where everything was in the building. I think during the excavation of the floor to kind of put the stair in, we hit one piece of conduit that had to be rerouted. So there wasn't kind of anything new in there, but the design district, we learned, actually most stores only average about 7 years, and then they either want to change to a new location in the design district or they're going to rebrand or design an entire interior space. So you actually have these existing buildings that are constantly being retransformed and with significant budgets too. It's not just like we're going to paint and move on. And so there's so much familiarity. Our MEP engineer had done all of the drawings for the original building. The contractor had just done the space before. I think that really helped us kind of navigate, avoid some of the issues you typically run into when you're working in an unknown condition of an existing building.
What a fantastic idea to get a contractor that's already worked in the space before. You got to move fast. That's a good way to do it. So looking back on your process and solutions for this particular project, what did you learn that you will take to the next when you get hired for tomorrow, that you'll do differently, just like right from the get-go, because of the lessons you learned of going through the process for this one? I mean, I think we all get more efficient every time because every project teaches us something.
I think for me, one of the items we took for granted a little bit was some of the kind of more high-end, long lead items that typically come last in the project. And so whether that be mirrors or toilets or things like that, there sometimes aren't a lot of alternates that you can go if you want to have a specialty pink toilet. And those are things that everyone talks about at the beginning of the project. And we say, hey, these are specialty items. We really need to make sure we get them. But we haven't even submitted for permit yet. The contractor's not going to go out and buy your toilet. And so those are items that I think tend to slip. And we did have some kind of last minute substitutions we had to make there, or items that are still coming. And I think just making sure those are things that don't get kicked to the end of the project. And as the architect, it's very easy to say, we had it in our drawings. It's not our problem anymore. But the reality is, if we don't follow up on some of those items, they're still not going to be there. And so I think making sure everyone's on the same page and checking in on some of those kind of smaller items can go a long way.
Or potentially purchasing. We typically purchase ourselves a lot of this, anything that's really special, to make sure that we get the quality, etc. There's some risk, of course, but I think that in this project, we could have purchased, there's like a pink toilet and a pink sink, and they're available, but they're available in 2 months. And we knew it from day one, and we should have just purchased them and, I don't know, placed them in Max's car garage or something until they're ready, which, goes back to the question of like how there's nothing too small or too big for you to tackle, because you know that you are in charge of the design intent, and there could be a plumber who's a subcontractor who does, sees a schedule but doesn't really know what does it mean to get a particular item. For me, another lesson that we learned, especially with fashion clients, is just have a really honest discussion, not only about budget, which we had from day one, but also some ideas that they might have for specialty items like drapes or maybe furniture, or even the millwork from Brazil, which I think, again, came out beautifully, but was too last minute. And I wish we actually factored it into the beginning, and we could have done more with this incredible resource. But, again, as you said, you learn, and hopefully, there are going to be more shops for the same, for PatBO in the States, and we can, do a better job. And I think that for us, the shop, of course, is a flagship, but we also, through working on it, actually developed a system for storage, and a modular system for display, and a way to work around the racks with mirrors and shelves that you can move around. So there was an added value here for the client that we actually did a little bit of research and development into items and ideas that we can propagate in the next project.
So I like to close out every episode with basically 2 questions. The first one is just a more broad industry question, not about this specific project, but just, to get the pulse of how different architects feel about different things. And I haven't asked this one in a while, so I decided I'm going to ask you guys. So in your opinion, what are the areas in our industry, in AEC as a whole, where you feel that we repeatedly continue to fail? I always like to phrase it as what drives you crazy at work and how can we do better? Because I have a list a mile long of things that, why does this continue to be a problem? We need to fix it. So just in your humble opinion, where do you think we could be doing better in this industry to be doing better as a whole on our buildings and our spaces?
So I think for me, one is a kind of bigger item and one is a little bit smaller. I think getting a better understanding of the owner-contractor contracts is super important because it kind of dictates how much we can push back on the contractor. And so, for instance, in this project, there was one small detail. It wasn't kind of particularly important, but based on the way they had the contract, I said to the contractor, you have to install this. I don't care. And they said, no, actually, we haven't charged them anything for it. It's a cost-plus contract, so we don't have to put it in. And so you kind of end up in this place where you really don't know how much you can push them if you don't really have an understanding of their contract, or sometimes you make a little bit of a fool of yourself when you try to proclaim thinking they have a different contract. And sometimes you're invited to those conversations, sometimes you're not. I think we were invited to some of the VE conversations in terms of thinking about replacements, but not all of them. And so in some cases, I think understanding what the client has agreed to in a separate meeting with the contractor can kind of land you in a bit of a difficult spot. So I think that's one thing that I would like to kind of participate more in on future projects. The other one is meeting minutes, which is someone who hated drafting meeting minutes at my last firm. They're so important. We started taking them for this project, and then when we hired the contractor on, he said it's going to be in the contractor scope. They didn't send the best meeting minutes at first, and we kind of dropped it and didn't say anything. But then it always turns into this finger pointing game, which now in emails, you can find out who said what and what we agreed to. But it's such a time sink when this person said this in one meeting, this person said something else via email. I think kind of really going through the task of just taking very clearly, it solves that. To go back and say, on March 15th, you agreed to this. It's very cut and dry rather than us spend hours looking through emails to point at some of that.
Dude, you are speaking to my heart. I teach project delivery and contract document education 24 weeks out of the year. And those are often in the process of design, the kinds of things our design professionals don't spend as much time understanding as they should, which is why I teach it. But I love that. I love that answer. How about you, Noam?
Good question. I think Max actually touched on the second part of his answer touched on what I take from this project, which is the meeting minutes. However, when you have a client in Brazil and you discuss ideas and design over WhatsApp, and Max and I and some other people speak on Slack, all of these become a part of the project knowledge. So I actually had a discussion about it with a friend the other day. All of these things have to be a part of the contract today. They're real decisions. We're just making them, maybe in a more casual way, or, in a more visual way. But for me, a part of the challenge of the practice, we are a young practice. We have to rethink how we handle all of these things and maybe take some of the labor and time that's associated with it. And I think maybe there's a way in which you can start, saying, well, WhatsApp is a part of the contract, right? There's a thread, the same in Slack. And I'm kind of curious how this could be incorporated into future projects and with the highest visibility for everyone.
Well, I know somebody who teaches a class. So if you want to send any of your people my way, next one starts in February. So final question. Everybody on the podcast gets this question. So at least I believe we as individuals all hope to live a life that leaves some kind of positive contribution or impact on our world to make the world a better place. I jokingly call that my personal mission to make the world a better place, my world domination statement. Huh. And I don't mean to take over the world. I mean to do the best I can in my world, in my arena where I can make a difference. So for both of you, personal or professional, whichever one you choose, how do you as an individual hope to make a difference or an impact on your world or our world? What is your personal world domination statement? Light, easy question.
It's very easy. Leave your ego at the door, produce really incredible design, and be a joy to be around.
I love that. I love that. So concise and so true, every bit of it. How about you, Max?
Well, I think for me, my wife and I just had a baby 3 weeks ago, so I don't feel much about domination right now, and more of a kind of survival statement. We're just hoping we can get through the next couple of months.
Well, I can tell you how you're going to make an impact on the world. It's with that new little human being that's in your house that you're going to be like every other parent. I raised or partially raised 6 children. You're going to want to teach them to be better than you, because that's what all parents' goal is we learned our lessons, and I'm going to hopefully impart those lessons on my children, and they will even do better in life than I do. And then they'll do the same with their children. And so that's the hope. So yeah, get some sleep. I'll call you back later, and you can check back with me in 6 months and tell me how you're going to take over the world once you get over the being a whole new dad thing. But congratulations.
Thank you.
I'm say boy or girl?
Boy, Lucas.
Lucas. Well, welcome to the world, Lucas. Go take a nap now. Gentlemen, thank you so much for joining me today and talking to me about this incredible space. It really, I am not kidding. I got on the website for their company, and it's like, oh, I did not need to get this interview. I did not need to get this interview, because I'm just like, want one of those? I got a holiday party Friday night that I want a particular dress for. So you guys are a bad influence. But I appreciate you taking the time to join me today, and I hope you'll come back in future projects and come back and talk to us about something else you have going on.
Yeah, we love that.
Thank you.
I would love to have you.
This was really wonderful.